This is the London Fintech Podcast, bringing you practical insights and approaches, stories and inspiration from the innovators who are building the new world of financial services. Welcome to London Fintech Podcast. Some would say that data is the new oil, and it's certainly the fuel for AI, which is taking the FS sector and this podcast by storm. I've spoken to AI-powered startups, heads of AI governance and safety. However, today I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of one of the most exciting firms that is laying the data foundations for enterprise AI. My guest today is Andy MacMillan, CEO of Alteryx. Alteryx is a billion-dollar revenue company and is the place where analytics, automation, and AI come together. Andy can doubtless give a better explanation than I can, and I'm sure he will in a few minutes. However, I see Alteryx as the end-to-end platform for enterprises to operationalize successful AI by unifying and speeding up data preparation, automation, and machine learning in a single controlled environment. It's a very visual and engaging system, so designed as much for analytical users more than developers, and something that I've seen firsthand on consulting engagements. So I've been really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome, Andy. It's great to talk to you.
It's great to see you, Tony. Thanks for having me on. And I'm not sure I can top that description of Alteryx. That was pretty good. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for the kind intro.
Well, there's going to be a short test in a few minutes. Hopefully you've got something better than I had. But let's learn a bit about you, perhaps. Start there. I'd love to get a bit of your background. I know you're no stranger to the data and the software space. And perhaps tell us what you were doing earlier career and how you come to be leading a firm like Alteryx.
Yeah, I've been in the software and technology space my whole career. So I graduated from Michigan State with a degree in information technology management, which does sound very 90s, which is when that happened. But I had a background, a minor in computer science, and I started my career as a developer and building websites and web applications for General Motors in the consulting space, and ended up eventually finding my way into software product companies, mostly in product management and product marketing. And then to your point on the data space, I went to Oracle and was a product manager there in their middleware area. Then I ran a division at Salesforce called data.com and ultimately decided to go into CEO roles. Most recently was CEO at a company called User Testing, and now CEO at Alteryx since December. Technical by background, but spent most of my time in and around product management, coming up through the ranks before doing the CEO job.
Brilliant. And we'll talk during this conversation a bit about perhaps where you're focusing your time. And I think that developer background perhaps comes out a bit. But just to, I guess, get the rest of the context and perhaps personalize the conversation a little bit. I know you've been traveling quite a bit, but I always ask guests what they do when they're off duty and what you do to decompress. And then we've had some fun hobbies. I don't know whether you've got anything where you spend your time.
I love sports, both playing sports. I like to play ice hockey. I like to golf. I spend a lot of time in the backyard playing basketball and things like that with my kids. My kids all love sports. So I've got two boys in high school, and one's a pitcher, one's an ice hockey player. And then I've got a 9-year-old daughter who might be my best athlete. She seems to be good at everything, and she wants to play every sport, which I absolutely love. And then my wife and I really enjoy watching sports as well. We watch a lot of college football. We watch the Warriors. So I tell people my weekends, I'm essentially an Uber driver for small athletes, and I just drive around to different events, and I absolutely love it.
And a sports coach, no doubt.
Yes, I coach the hockey team. I'm an assistant coach on the softball team. My oldest has now outpaced my skill set in baseball. So at some point, when your kids know more about it than you do, it's time to stop coaching. But yeah, I do enjoy that as well.
I love that. I mean, I've been hosting this show for a bit over a year, and we've had some interesting hobbies along the way, scuba diving and horse riding and various things. But you're the first ice hockey player, and that's a sport that I really respect. When I was at university for about 18 months, I was at a place called Durham in north of England. They had a very good ice hockey team, and the university decided they would have one as well. And we were a very bad ice hockey team. But you're padded from shins to your top of your head and you're sort of sumo suited up, and you can't get hurt. And it was so much fun. I mean, really quite an aggressive game though.
It is. I really enjoy playing. Like I said, I still try to skate once or twice a week. I also played a bit of inline hockey in college, and actually did my MBA at the University of Edinburgh and played for the inline team there. So I spent part of my year doing my MBA traveling around Scotland and the broader UK, playing in hockey tournaments on inline skates in gymnasiums. It was a lot of fun. It was a great way to meet people.
Brilliant. Before we jump right into today's episode, a quick thank you to our sponsor, NextWave. NextWave is an award-winning consultancy that is helping many of the world's leading banks, investment managers, and insurers deliver on their growth, efficiency, risk, and control goals and transform their businesses. With a senior team who have come from MD-level positions in major firms like HSBC, Barclays, and UBS, NextWave has both the deep industry expertise and the hands-on capabilities in AI, data, and automation to drive real results. More business outcomes and less PowerPoint from the consulting experience, as their clients like to say. NextWave has moved 2-week manual processes to 5-minute agentic automations, rescued global banking regulatory control programs, and digitized deal platforms, sustainability, and regulatory reporting systems. And they do much of this with hands-on engineering capabilities on leading technologies, which include ServiceNow, Alteryx, Quantexa, and Camunda. So if a modern and specialist alternative to the big brand consulting model sounds appealing, one which covers the full life cycle of strategy specialists and solutions, but with small practitioner teams, rapid delivery, and a better price point, then perhaps you should talk to NextWave. Visit nxwave.com to find out more and get in touch. That's nxwave.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. Okay, so, and tell us a bit about Alteryx, if you will. It's an interesting journey for the business. You're a very significant size now and growing fast. I'd love to hear a bit of the background of Alteryx sort of growing up and the story of the firm getting to where it is in this current position in the market.
Yeah, I mean, the company was started over 20 years ago, and it was on a simple premise that there are people that really understand data. So they're technical in regards to data, but they're not software developers. And that audience's tool set historically sort of ran out at the upper bounds of Excel. And so what do you use beyond that? When I want to get maybe pretty large data sets, maybe before cloud data platforms, I might be getting a large report from Salesforce. Maybe I'm also getting my purchasing report out of an SAP or a NetSuite. Maybe I'm trying to reconcile those things for auditing. That was all done manually. People would have multiple spreadsheets and they're line by line trying to reconcile these things. And so Alteryx was really born to solve that problem. How do you give this sort of data knowledgeable analyst a tool that enables them to go in and work with these large data sets and build automations? So if I'm going to reconcile my budget versus actual every month, I don't want to literally have to do it every month. I want to build an automation that pulls data from those systems and does it for me. And so that was the foundations. We've been building that product to do just more and more things. There are literally hundreds of tools in Alteryx that people use to solve sometimes simple problems, sometimes really complicated problems, all of it around then driving an output. It might be a Tableau dashboard. It might be a report that you're generating. And now more and more, and I think where the company's going is it's starting to become AI agents, data for LLMs, things like that, and working now with these big cloud data platforms. And so the history of the company has been solving data challenges for people that know data. The future of the company, I think, is solving data challenges for people that know data. But like a lot of things, the story stays the same, that the problem set evolves. And now we're seeing people work with much larger data sets and these large cloud data platforms with a whole new set of requirements coming around AI. And we're still in there helping people that know the business be able to solve those problems. And as you mentioned, very importantly, automate those things and scale them. So we have customers that have 100,000 workflows running, solving problems every single day across their business.
Yeah. So I think we'll zoom in on Alteryx's position in the AI landscape and the agentic world that we're now starting to occupy. But maybe incorrectly, I sometimes tell our clients it's the best data wrangling platform because, for want of a better word, it's
for sure
multi-data sourcing, normalizing, blending, and then ultimately visualizing or reporting. So you're obviously doing something with that data once you bring it together.
Yeah, I think, I talk to a lot of customers that will tell me, we have this strategic master data management strategy around a data lake. And those are all good projects. But if your AI strategy is going to wait for that project to be completed to a point where you say, we have one canonical record for all of our data, we have one master data lake, we have solved the world's data problems, I've yet to walk into a company that operates like that. The reality is you have some of that. And again, that's worthwhile. But you have a lot of data in other places bouncing around that people have to, and I like your word, sort of wrangle that data and then build automations around it. So maybe I'm connecting to a spreadsheet that lives on OneDrive, but I need to connect to it every month and solve a problem. Like, help me automate that so that I'm not having to go wrangle that data every month. I can automate. So you're spot on. And I think that's what people love about the tool. It deals with the reality of people's actual data really well.
Yeah. Without requiring you to get rid of the tens of thousands of spreadsheets that any sort of tier one bank finance department may well have in place. And obviously, most of those institutions are on a journey to eliminate end user compute, but it's probably a journey they're never going to finish. And many of those workbooks are there for a reason. So I
And
think
we might
sort of
be
that
part of that solution
orchestration.
set. Yeah, but it might also be how are you going to get off of all those spreadsheets? It might be by getting them into Alteryx. And maybe you're starting to output them into your data lake, but like that's the vehicle to deal with the fact that it feels like with spreadsheets, every time you eliminate two, three more pop up somewhere else. Right? Maybe you're still winning the battle, but it's an ongoing battle. And so how do you give people tooling to help fight that battle with you and go wrangle that data?
Yeah. So I've dived a little bit into EUC solutioning. So I'm just going to sort of wind it back a bit. And I'd love to get your perspective on the current market environment, because really want to have the conversation in the context of the current situation, particularly in the financial services sector. And I think a lot of that context is AI and automation. But what's your take on the current wave of tech transformation, essentially, that enterprise firms are focused on?
I think there's, from my seat, sort of two big things happening. One, maybe not so much just AI focused, but the world was growth at all cost for a handful of years with, zero interest rates and those kinds of things. And I think when you get to that level of growth at all cost, you start to sort of lose the plot on, well, actually profitability is a thing. And so I think we went through a couple of years of companies sort of snapping back. And now I think we're back to sort of a normal balance. And so when I talk to executives, what I hear is, we are trying to make investments in the business to grow the business in the right ways, but we're being thoughtful about how we're doing that. And I think that's when AI enters the conversation. And I hear a lot of executives saying, how can I think about bringing AI into my organization at a level that's going to impact my P&L or my balance sheet, where I'm solving problems, where I can create growth opportunities, where maybe I can grow faster than my expenses grow by investing in an area. And so I think there is a hype around AI. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Every conference, you look at the stock market and the valuations of AI companies, I get all those things. But I do think there's an emerging pragmatism at the executive ranks of financial services companies. I'm hearing this from manufacturing customers of, I want to use AI, but I want to use AI in a way that is driving my balance sheet, right? That is creating growth, help me manage cost, show me how that impact is going to show up. And I think that is healthy.
Yeah, I think it's what Gartner, amongst other analysts, first called useful AI about 2 years ago. And it was more about making sure the AI is actually in your workflow and it's driving some measurable business outcomes. So it's going beyond the sort of the early gen AI creativity and sort of widget AI, as I used to call it, that could do a little bit of copywriting or create an image or something. It's actually how do you embed AI capabilities in corporate workflows so that they can go faster, move data, and drive an outcome for the business.
I think you're exactly right. And when you talk about the workflows and the process, I think that's the key. I use AI all the time. I'm sure you do as well. Many of your listeners, I'm sure do. It's nice that it can help me do a little research more effectively, or summarize something for me, or clean up some of my English skills in an email that I'm writing. But that's not the transformational opportunity. The transformational opportunity is, how does this change the way my business operates? And I think that's an area where a lot of organizations are still struggling. I think it comes down to a trust issue. I think people see what AI can do, but they don't feel yet that there is a predictability of it, that there's a way to go in and sort of see its work and know what it did, and to trust that every time it's going to do the right thing. I have these experiences. I don't know if you do as well, where I ask AI to do something, and 9 out of 10 times it does it the right way, but the 10th time it just sort of does whatever it feels like doing.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, you can sort of call it on it. Like, I have a GPT I wrote, and I asked it to build graphs a certain way. And again, about 9 out of 10 times it builds the graph the way I asked it to. And then the 10th time it builds a totally different graph. And I can
Yeah.
say, hey, GPT, that's not what I told you to do. Build the graph the way I asked you to do it, please. And it will go, oh, you're right. And it'll build the graph the way I want. But the hard part is, how do you build a business process around that? And so what I hear a lot of executives trying to figure out is, help me capture the promise of AI, but I still need the predictability, the explainability, the auditability of a workflow as I think of it traditionally. And so I think that rubric is what I see a lot of people working on right now. Show me a repeatable, demonstrable outcome where I can just trust that the agent will do it and let me scale it.
Yeah. And I think that's what all the institutions are wrestling with. These, Gen AI is by its nature probabilistic, and you don't get that repeatability and full audit trail as explicitly. That's not the way the technology is working currently. Although I know quite a few firms are trying to bridge that gap and sort of deliver explainable AI. And so for me, the promise of sort of true agentic synthetic team, I'll set it loose in the wild and it can just go deal with my customers. We're not there yet. It's about agent workflows on defined rails. And which is why the data pipelines and the data platforms are so important part of that architecture.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think there's a higher expectation that it gets it right.
Yes.
You think about, just go work with my customers, for example. Well, we do that all the time, or we hire somebody fresh out of college and we give them a job in the front of the store and we tell them, go work with customers. And we accept a certain level of like, yeah, they're a 20-year-old kid trying to figure it out. We don't treat AI like that. We don't go, oh, well, it's a brand new AI. It's going to go out and sort of do its best. We expect it to do a really solid job of what it's doing. And I think that's a fair expectation. To be clear, I'm not suggesting we lower our expectations. I'm simply stating I think it's a high bar. And so how do we empower AI with a constrained but correct set of data to go do that, but also with the auditability of it? One of my favorite examples is we wrote an agent internally that our marketing team was using, and we wrote it using Alteryx, and we used ChatGPT for this example. And there's a step where we do a GDPR check. Before you can email somebody, you need to be GDPR compliant. We do that check in Alteryx because it seemed crazy to say in the middle of a step to ChatGPT, like, hey, ChatGPT, do you think this is GDPR compliant? And have it confidently take a guess. Like you can't do that in your business. And so I think there's a set of capabilities that organizations are trying to think through, which is how do I do definitive things that I can show follows my business rule set, but also add in all these new probabilistic things, to your point, that I've never been able to do before. That's valuable. I think that combination is what people are trying to get right.
Yeah. And ultimately, we've got human accountability in a regulated industry. So, we need a greater degree of confidence and governance, I think, before we're going to be letting the AI agents truly loose. I've got one that I got GPT I wrote to do client intel, client research before we talk to clients, and I called it the client intelligence analyst. So it's the CIA, and I get different versions of the client report each time I run it. Now that's okay for me just to get a few pointers on talking to someone, but it's not okay if you're dealing with a regulated customer.
Yeah, and it might be that pieces of that are both correct. It might not. How do you know that? One of the examples I've been using internally is I was at a conference recently and a football player spoke, and then somebody else spoke after them and said that they looked up on ChatGPT and Gemini how many touchdowns this football player had. It was an American football player, and they got different answers. And everybody laughed in the audience, right? Of like, oh yeah, AI, getting it wrong. But the kind of double click on that is maybe they're both the right answer. It's just answering a different set of questions. What about preseason? What about postseason? What about, running touchdowns? Like, who knows? And one of the things that we've been trying to convey at Alteryx is if you use just that example, imagine if you were running a professional sports franchise that really cared about these analytics. Like maybe you're making 100 million pound decisions on drafting a footballer, right? You want to be right. You want the people that know football to be going in and modeling out what data you would want to give to your agent to figure that out. That's not a software developer problem. That's not somebody who knows Python really well. That's somebody who knows football really well. And so I think that speaks to this idea of how do we empower the people that really understand the domain. In this example, I'm using football. It could be accounting. It could be sales ops. It could be bank reconciliation, trade processes. Like, how do those people get a set of tools that let them tell Gemini or GPT or Anthropic, here's what this means in my business. Here's the data that I use to make this decision. Here's how you do this calculation. I think that's a really important part of the equation that I think people should be talking about a lot more, is how do you bring not just the data, but the knowledge to these things?
It's a great example. I know you've got some sports teams as customers, and the one that sticks out for me is McLaren Formula One. To your example, you don't want to be getting the data wrong when you're traveling at 250 miles an hour.
Yeah, and who knows that data well, right? Again, that's not going to be necessarily somebody you just go hire off the street that knows Python or SQL or, you know, software development tools really well. You want somebody that knows racing. Like you want somebody who is pulling in the race car sensor data that lives and breathes racing data. And so you're right. We work with the team at McLaren on a whole set of data pipelines. They use this around reliability, which we're really proud. They just won another constructors championship. I think their cars have been outstanding this year. We work with them on some of their eco reporting. So there's a whole set of reporting that goes in F1. They, of course, have to do cap management and a lot of the financials around how to run the team and
Yeah.
put their money to work. So it's a great example. And I think it speaks to, again, why domain expertise matters. And we're all about, again, that data knowledge worker to me is somebody who doesn't just know the data as a math problem. They know it as a representation of the business. Like, why is this data this way? What do these things actually mean? How does it relate to one another? And I think that's a really important distinction about who's informing these AI agents and these tools is getting to those folks and setting them up to kind of drive that.
Yeah. So, how do you think the AI revolution, if I can call it that, it is a revolution. How does it compare to previous technology shifts? And you've led firms through earlier phases of technology evolution and revolution. So, I'm curious, how does this feel different?
I think one of the things that happens when you do stuff long enough is it's different but the same. I think
Yes.
what I think keeps happening is every time we go through one of these massive changes, we go through it faster than the last one. And part of it's additive, right? Why did the mobile revolution happen so much faster than the internet revolution? It's because we had the internet and apps and everything sort of took off, and everybody could, because of the internet, you could build an app all of a sudden, put it in the Apple App Store, and have millions of people using it that day. And that made people want more mobile apps. So the internet sort of empowered mobile. Mobile sort of drove cloud. Now that people are all out and about, you want to connect to them all, the cloud becomes more valuable. I think cloud means that we now have these scaled infrastructures and AI comes around and that enables it to go even faster. I also think the business imperative around change speeds up. The way we as executives are running to embrace AI is because we've all been through a few of these transformations and we've learned you don't want to be standing on the sidelines. We've learned how to experiment. And so I think that also drives adoption. So I would say, um, I think comparing, is AI more transformative than the internet is a little bit like comparing sports stars from different eras. It's like, I don't know how to do that comparison directly, but the pace of it is definitely faster than I've ever seen. The wow factor to me feels maybe to the level of the internet. I mean, I remember that when maybe not all your listeners are as old as I am, but I remember first really getting on the internet in college and just being like, this is sort of mind blowing. Like I'm sort of connected to everybody. I have that feeling again with Chat GPT and Gemini
Yeah.
and Claude of just every day I try something new and every day I'm surprised, but then I'm trying to apply it to my business. And I think that rate of people trying it and trying to apply it to their business, that afternoon is incredible. And I think any leader that's not really bringing an everyday beginner's mind to what can AI do today? How can I apply it to my business? I think is going to get left behind. And I think that is definitely true.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's happening now. I mean, I find it a continual head spin every day. And there's a new news headline in the AI space, every week or two, a major headline. And then it's something like, what can we do with AI video, or what can we do with AI analytics, or agent automation? I mean, it's just extraordinary what's possible. But there is quite a lot of hype out there as well. So do you have a view on sort of, where you see the biggest gap perhaps between what we're seeing in the headline hype and perhaps some of the things I was talking about versus the practicalities of AI adoption?
That's a great question. I would say right now, I think the gap is trust. And in the enterprise, I think that's because when you bring in a large language model that's been trained on an internet's worth of data, it's really smart about all the stuff on the internet. It's had so much data to build its models and reference check its models and do these things. And then you bring it into your company data set. And I know we all like to think of our companies having a lot of data, but when you compare it to the corpus of the internet, we'll have a relatively small amount of data. And it's a small amount of data where a lot of the logic around that data sits in all these applications. And these applications don't work very well with AI. And they don't really contemplate AI. And so I think we're having a very hard time generally in organizations figuring out how to make AI actually understand our business to the level of the kind of, again, the analysts that are in our business. If you ask an AI tool, what's my pipeline in this quarter for my sales teams by deal stage, it has a very hard time figuring that out. If
Yeah.
you ask a Gemini, what's my commission on this deal? It doesn't know how to go figure that out. You're right. Nobody's asking, Claude, am I going to pass audit with these financials based on these 6 different systems I'm pointing you to? Like it doesn't do that today. And so I think the reason we're seeing people hesitate in the enterprise is if you simply feed it all that data unvarnished, like, hey, go crawl my data lake, it gives you the wrong answers. It doesn't know how to calculate revenue the way your finance team calculates revenue. It doesn't know how to calculate commissions the way your commissions teams calculates commissions. And there's nothing worse than rolling out a tool that gives people the wrong answer confidently and quickly. That is a very fast way to have people stop using the tool. And so I think what I see happening now is organizations trying to figure out how to deliberately bring trust back into the equation by having data, and again, the knowledge around the data, how to build the calculations, how to answer a question, getting more targeted and solving specific problems so that people can trust the AI that they're using is giving them the right answer. And I think when that happens, we'll go to the next phase, which we were talking about earlier, which is now I want to actually automate a business process because I trust that the AI is giving me the right answer the right way every time.
Yeah, and that's trusting your model and it's trusting your data foundations. Let's just focus in a bit on financial services. So banks, insurers, investment managers, and you have many of them understanding in your client base. Where are you seeing those firms focus their AI investments?
It's really been all over the map, which has been interesting. You're right. We work with most of the largest financial institutions in the world. We work with a lot of the fintechs. We work with a lot of, regional banking players, a lot of the wealth management platforms. I think there's a lot of ambition around what AI can do in financial services. I don't think there's a lot of consensus yet on where to go first. So I can have back-to-back meetings, 2 different days with 2 different large banks and get 2 entirely different surface area that they're looking at AI. I think everyone is interested in some of the sort of back office activities that banks invest a tremendous amount of time and effort and money in. And I think really do want to get right. I would say one of the things that is so different when you work with banks and when you read about banks in the paper is I think banks do want to get it right. They do want to have the compliance. They do want to have all the transparency around their trading platforms and things. And so I see a lot of banks trying to figure out how do I speed up that process, make sure I'm getting it right, have it be auditable, have a great experience for my customers? Can AI help me there? So that's an area that I definitely see happening. We're definitely seeing it in the client service space. How do I automate around call center, those kinds of things, I think is definitely a big area. I think the other is just internal operations. Banks, especially large banks, are very large, complicated organisms, multiple divisions. How do you scale and frankly acquire? A lot of banks are acquisitive and be able to bring people onto your platform more efficiently, more effectively. I think that's the kind of business process reengineering, Tony, that we were talking about earlier, that I think they're starting to think about that as well. How do I change this slow, painful process that happens inside the bank and make it one that scales better, faster with AI? So I definitely think that's all part of it. Maybe a bit more on the ops side today than the sort of quant side.
Yeah. Now we're seeing developer productivity and a broad range of knowledge worker, knowledge base use cases, sort of next gen chatbots plus, and now agentic. As I say, from my earlier sort of perspective, perhaps more sort of single agent and early multi-agent workflows than real sort of synthetic teams at this stage. But that's sort of what we're seeing. And I love those sort of top-down problem statements that you're getting from your clients in terms of customer support or analytics support. I mean, and it's a good segue actually to where does Alteryx fit in the landscape? Because we've been talking about sort of broad landscape and AI revolution, but where does Alteryx really fit? So when you're thrown a problem statement like that in the CEO's office, what's the Alteryx positioning for how you can help move those institutions forward?
The big one for us is being the platform that delivers that trust.
Yeah.
You can build an Alteryx workflow as an analyst that understands the data around a process, and you can feed that data into an AI platform in a way that is very clear, very prescriptive, and gets the answer right. You can take a large table that's got row level data from some system that's, hundreds of thousands of rows long and hundreds of columns wide. We'll have these under our applications, and analysts can distill that down into like, oh, actually, here's how that data gets brought up to a level that the bank will want to analyze. I've checked that this math is right. I can run that every time, and I can hand that to Claude and say, hey, write up an analysis of these trends, but it's a finite data set that is correct, and it will operate
Yeah.
off that data set and be correct. And I think that is really powerful. We're starting to see uh, banks in particular want to be able to do that in a way that, one, they can show the auditability of the process they went through to generate the data set. You can also bring the AI into Alteryx, so it can become a container where I do that sort of probabilistic thing as a step in the workflow. And I can also maybe write that output to a table and continue on with my workflow. And now I can say to a regulator, here's exactly what I did. I pulled this data together. I gave it this prompt. Here's what it gave me back. Then I did these things. And you end up with this nice mix of declarative, auditable, repeatable steps where you're adding in this really cool new probabilistic capability that might write something on a statement, or might, do a summarization for you, or do a categorization for you, but in a way that, again, you can go back and say, here's what we did, here's why we did it, and I think that's powerful. We've started referring to a process around that as being an AI data clearinghouse. So that's not a product, it's a process.
Yeah.
But you can use Alteryx because it's so visual, and because it's not, all gobbledygook code for people. You can take an Alteryx process around something you want to do with AI, and you can run the workflow itself through an approval process. So you could go to the regulator team, your privacy team, your InfoSec team, your data security team, and say, hey, I'm not asking for permission to let AI, crawl through our data lake and hope for the best. I'm asking for permission for this exact set of data to go through this process. Here's all the declarative things I'm doing. Here's the checks. Here's the auditability. Here's where AI comes into play. And it gives people the ability to start to say yes to finite problem solving with AI and data that I think is getting people able to start demonstrating real value. And I think that is unlocking forward motion. And that's what companies are looking for right now. They want to get from, I've given AI to everybody as a productivity tool, to I'm using AI to solve a business problem. And
Yeah.
what most people need is the first couple business problems they're solving. And this AI data clearinghouse is a way for companies to sort of speak the language of the approval process, and start to move forward on those projects.
Yeah. So that's Alteryx as a trusted, auditable, explainable data platform. So that foundation of the AI is, where did this data come from? How did you bring it together? How do we know it's complete, accurate, consistent? Being able to answer and provide a solution for all of that. And I love the data clearinghouse concept, because that's, I guess, the way that you get the data into the trusted data platform with the right checks and balances along the way.
That's right. And I think it gives some kind of nice firewalls, if you will, around what data the AI is using. I'm not letting it have free reign and hoping for the best. There's a lot of concerns right now around, data leakage. There was a story last week. I won't name any vendors. It's not a name and shame moment, but there was an AI agent on one of the big platforms that started getting tricked into answering questions and giving data that it wasn't supposed to be providing. And everybody's worried about this if you're in information security. So I think the answer to that is, don't give AI broad access to all your data and try to train it to behave. Give it a subset of your data only that you're not worried about it working on. And again, maybe one day we'll get to a place with an all-knowing AI that works across your data seamlessly. I think that's in the near term about as likely as having that perfectly organized single data lake that everybody's operating out of without a single spreadsheet in the company. Until we get to that point, maybe the right answer is, give each AI tool you're using a constrained set of data that you can do a risk assessment around, and sort of, again, crawl, walk, run to get some of that going. And so I think that framing really helps regulated industry say, yes, we can do that. We're not training it on a large data set and hoping it behaves. We're training it on a specific data set, and I can do a risk assessment on that data specifically. And I think that's game changing.
Yeah, and you've called out there the data lake or data lakehouse ambitions and initiatives that all the major firms are embarked upon. So the question perhaps arises, how does Alteryx play alongside the big data platforms such as Databricks, Snowflake, Fabric, etc.? Because some folks in listening to this might say, hey, no, isn't that where I put all the data? Why do I need
Sure.
Alteryx?
So Alteryx, historically, you're right, sort of operated mostly at the desktop level with people using it sort of pragmatically with spreadsheets. We made massive investments over the last couple of years to bring the kind of Alteryx capability set to the cloud data platform universe. We did it initially, just to be blunt, we did it in a separate product area. So we created this thing called the Alteryx Analytics Cloud, and it was a set of tools and capabilities that ran in the browser that let you connect to whatever cloud data platform you're using as a business user and use Alteryx things on that platform. And you could push it down into Databricks or BigQuery or Snowflake or whatever and do all this stuff. What we announced this year was we're bringing all of those capabilities into the Alteryx Designer product that everybody's using today and not treating it as a separate product line. It's a new set of capabilities that's coming to every one of our users. We call that Alteryx One. And I think that's really exciting because what we found was where initially we thought the people that would use the cloud data warehouse or the data lake was a different user, more on kind of the IT side of the world generally. What we're finding is no, this is now our core user is saying, hey, I want to maybe still use some spreadsheets, living in the reality of my messy data, but I also connect to our Snowflake instance and I want to be able to use Alteryx natively in Snowflake. And so that's something we're now shipping and bringing to customers. It's been really well received by our customer base. We partner with the cloud data platforms to sort of make sure we're leveraging their technology and using the capability that people are investing in. And we're actually looking at even bringing some of their unique capabilities into the Alteryx palette. So imagine you connect Alteryx into whatever your big investment is, and new capabilities show up that you can drag in because you're using that powerful cloud data platform. And so I'm actually really excited about how we are kind of crossing that bridge and connecting into that universe. And I think what we're going to see a lot of customers doing, if you sort of connect these three dots, is I want to let my data knowledgeable analyst connect into my cloud data platform and in that platform be able to create a subset of AI ready data that has the context. They might do it in that platform. And then I'll tell AI, you can only operate in this sort of contained space that analyst creates. And so I'm really excited about how that comes full circle and really leverages the investments that a lot of our customers are making in these big platforms.
Yeah, so you can use Alteryx in the clearinghouse mode to feed the big data platform. You can use the Alteryx tools inside the cloud data platforms and use the cloud data inside the Alteryx platform. So
That's
this
right.
is
That's
fully
right.
integrated from all directions.
But really trying to give customers choice and flexibility. Again, we can't stand on the sidelines and tell customers, once you have everything extremely well organized, we'll come in and help you work with your data. That's just not the reality they live in. So it's all an and, work with the cloud data platform natively and work with their spreadsheets and work with their Salesforce reports, whatever they need. And a lot of times what they'll do is output into that cloud data platform. So I'm taking the messiness that I'm dealing with, but the end result is I want to be in my managed cloud data platform. So, kind of to use a golf analogy, kind of playing it as it lies and making sure that people can solve problems regardless of the state of their data.
Yeah. And for those listening to this, still trying to visualize Alteryx, this is a video podcast, but we don't have any slides. So it's hard to, and we're both waving our hands around a bit. It's a little bit difficult to illustrate, but we've both made the point that Alteryx is highly visual and it's a visual data canvas. So if anyone out there's, built a Visio data process flow, but if you were to overlay that concept on data coming from multiple sources, what Alteryx is doing here is connecting to really any data source you can ever think of, and then allowing you to build the left to right flow of that data and bring it together and normalize it and drive some data derivations from it. So in a sort of data pipeline model. And beyond that description, I would urge you to go to the Alteryx website and have a look and watch some of the demos, but it is pretty cool. Did I get that right, Andy?
That is, and it's fun to play with. So if you're not familiar with the product, go grab the trial, get a couple of spreadsheets, you're connected to one of your cloud data platforms. One of my favorite parts of the job is I've been building stuff in Alteryx, plugging it into GPTs. It is not a tool that you have to know how to code to use. It's just a tool you have to understand your data where you can build really fun stuff.
Yeah. So I was going to come back to that actually, because you introed with your developer background, and what I was going to ask you, but you sort of answered the question perhaps, is if I was to ask your wider team, what do you think Andy's superpower is? I know part of the, because I've spoken to a lot of your wider team, I know part of the answer would be he's really hands-on. He builds stuff.
I think it's being hands-on with our product.
Yeah.
But I also think one of my superpowers is I got to be a pretty senior product leader at a really young age. One of the things that made me learn how to do was be clear about the alignment, but really be empowering and leave people to do their job. I was in my late 20s. I was a VP at Oracle. I had people working for me that were 10 years older than me, had been doing the job longer than me, and were VPs themselves. So I had to learn how to lead, but not direct. And that's kind of a CEO job. Even though everybody does work for you, you're not the head of sales, you're not the head of finance, you're not the head of product. You got to kind of lead, but get everybody aligned. So I think that's one. But then I get really hands-on with customers and the product and talking to employees. And the product is what you are if you're a technology company, right? You're your product and the people that show up around your product and help customers solve problems. And so I don't know how you lead a tech company if you're not into what your product does. That's part of the fun. So you're right. I do spend some of my weekends building workflows and doing some more online challenges and really trying to dig in. And I genuinely enjoy it. I think it is fun to play with technology and see what it can do. And then I talk to people about it. I go to the office and I say to people like, I was building this and it was really fun. And have you built this thing? And and that's when people go like, hey, he's not kidding around. Like he really does like messing with the product. And I think that's fun for folks.
Yeah, from the conversations I've had, that has really resonated with your team. And I love that, leading by influence, which is actually sort of a consultative thing. So I recognize that, but more leading by doing and getting hands-on and rolling the sleeves up, which is so important, I think.
Yeah,
So
and I
can
think
I ask
leaders
you,
can. I think leaders can do that in every company. It doesn't just have to be a tech company, but really getting in there and doing the thing your company does and being excited about it gets people energized.
yeah. And so love to know, I mean, who do you see as the competition and what sets Alteryx apart? And, on certainly over the last few years and actually winding back quite some way, I've come across what I might call data blending tools or visual data tools. And there are other things out there. There was one called Lavastorm we used to work with years ago, and I'm not sure what their status is currently. But, how do you show up in the competitive landscape for this type of platforms?
Yeah, I think we're a pretty unique product in the level of sophistication and automation we provide, but that we do it for kind of a business kind of user, a no code, low code environment. What I see as the alternatives are a little bit more of do it yourself, kind of DIY, and creating a bifurcation between what the business can do and what the IT organization does. So maybe you're just living in spreadsheets. You're not using Alteryx. You're just sort of doing it by hand. That's an option. Maybe you're trying to blend spreadsheets together one moment at a time. There are really kind of cool AI capabilities that can help you do that, as a one-off, hey, help me merge these fields. It can do that, but that's not really an automation. And so then
Yeah.
you flip to the other side of the equation and maybe you're going down to IT and saying, hey, can you send me a Python developer that can work with me for a week to figure out how to automate this thing that I'm doing and building it? I think what's unique about Alteryx is the ability to kind of solve that problem, build it in a repeatable flow, and then deploy it into IT supported infrastructure often, but to be able to do that as a business user and solve
Yeah.
that problem. So again, it's a more of a, maybe it's true to a lot of technology products. It's not so much a direct competition as much as a manual alternative, right? If you want to manually combine your spreadsheets, you can do that. If you want to manually write Python code to run in your cloud data platform, like people do that. I think it's better and faster to empower the people with a tool set that lets them automate that. But that's the difference. So most of our new sales are people saying, oh my gosh, didn't know I could automate this like that. Oh yeah, I kind of do something like that with something else. I'll try it with Alteryx. Like we don't have sales cycles like that.
Yeah. And what do you see coming next, Andy? I mean, I've been with one of our workflow automation partners this morning at the European conference, and the whole conference floor, it was a major chunk of the Excel Center in London, was all agentic AI, agentic AI, agentic AI. And you've got, and this is, a full focus for the sector, and you have AI in the box. I know that's already in the product. And as we've been discussing for the last few minutes, Alteryx as the data platform is integral to the AI architectures and the AI applications that firms are building. So you're already fully fully part of that stack. So I guess that's an important part of where you're focused. But what's what's on the product roadmap, and perhaps how you responding to that prioritization in the market?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's a hard problem for leaders in tech. When a hype
It's a
cycle
long question.
happens,
I apologize
no,
for
it's great.
that.
But this pattern happens all the time. A hype cycle emerges. Every tech company gets out a can of paint and they paint their company with whatever that hype cycle is.
Yeah.
And it all sort of sounds the same, right? You go into a vendor showroom at a big conference and 3/4 of the banners say the same combination of 5 words. Like we've been, this happens a lot. And we're certainly in one of those right now. What I try to focus on is not just what we do. So yes, bringing AI and data together to build agents and solve problems. Like again, there's 1,000 companies that probably have that on their website. What we do is important in who we do it for. The fact that we enable a business analyst, an operations team to build an automation that they can bring into an AI, or they can bring AI into that automation and solve a problem themselves, again, in partnership with their IT infrastructure, I think is quite unique. We have a financial services customer. I can't use their name publicly, but to give you the case study, they have an initiative where they're trying to save 1 million man hours of effort in their middle and back office. Their initial goal is to use AI to do a bunch of that. And right away, they've hit half of that target just with Alteryx, building automations that haven't even been agentified yet, but just giving people a tool to help them automate and scale and solve problems. In every one of those instances, I'm sure someone could come in and write a whole bunch of code in Python or SQL or something to do that thing. The problem is these teams don't all have the time to stand in line with IT to do that. And when you give them a tool and they know the problem, they solve it. So what we do that's different isn't the words on the pitch. It's who we're helping actually go do it. And one of the funny things that came out of this customer was they said to us, yeah, we have a whole set of strategic initiatives to get all of our data together. And Alteryx thankfully isn't part of that because everything in the strategic initiatives takes forever. Instead, we just gave Alteryx to everybody. And while that's going on, we're solving all these problems. And now we think we're going to save 500,000 man hours this year and all the stuff we've done with Alteryx. And so we're trying to be pragmatic and actionable and aligned with what the business is trying to do. While I think there's a lot of people out there trying to create big, long run IT transformation projects for developers, which are also fine. That's not what we're trying to do.
No. And that's a great point because this is agile and very rapid to deploy. So our teams that use the technology, typically it's sort of 6 to 8 week initiatives, and then it's on to what's next in the backlog. But you can burn through use cases, either whether it's refactoring existing EUCs or building certain data pipelines and aggregations very quickly using the technology. And there's actually a couple of things that you said there that that definitely resonate in terms of you can drive the efficiency through the data analytics, which are your example of saving however many million hours, for Big Bang. What's going to be really interesting is when we do agentify those flows and we go to the next step, which is having the agents run the workflow and problem solve on it and drive a further efficiency. And I know our team have been looking at this, and we've built something for those in the banking audience will recognize it, a FOBO rec, a front office, back office rec. It's part of the product control process. And we've put some agents over the top. And this is using, I think you know about this one, using the Alteryx technology. And we've got this synthetic team of, I think it's 5 or 6 analyst personas that are using Alteryx automatically to run that reconciliation. It's comparing the data, it's looking at the breaks, it's finding the root causes, and it's fixing them. So I think that's a very exciting use case, and it's not productionized at this stage, but I think this is perhaps an example of something to come.
It's a great example. And I think it speaks to the idea of combining the capabilities of LLMs with the predictability of data automation.
Yeah.
And I think the one that sort of gets my mind blown a little bit is closing the loop on that, where today, like most companies, we also have a co-pilot that will help you use Alteryx. So if you're new to Alteryx, or even if you're not and you just need some help working through something, our co-pilot uses AI to help you use Alteryx. Our Copilot gets better all the time, and it's get pretty good at using some of the tools in the Canvas. In a universe, maybe in the not too distant future, where if your organization doesn't have a pipeline that answers a question that your AI gets asked, your AI might ask Alteryx to put that pipeline together. And maybe
Yeah.
that goes through an approval process, but if nothing else, it would be auditable. It wouldn't be AI is a black box and it gave me a number and I kind of can't figure out where it all came from. You could go, oh, it answered this question. The way it did that was it used Alteryx to go pull together the data that it needed. I have a traceable workflow that shows where that data came from. And in fact, I could maybe productize that pipeline, say, hey, we want to make this a regular thing that the GPT has access to. Maybe I want to modify it slightly. Like, actually, that's not how we would calculate that. Here's the answer. And I think that gets to this kind of trust layer around AI that I think is game changing. Like, if I can implement that at scale, I start to have a way as an operations team to say, I have both predictability and the power of AI solving a problem.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of what's coming next and how institutions will be doing things differently over the coming months and years. And we're going to run out of time in a few minutes, but just to sort of bring this home a bit, we started the conversation with the Alteryx growth story and sort of where it came from 20 years ago. Certainly in the AI and analytics space, in the software space, it's a pretty fluid industry and a precarious one as well. So we've seen this with a lot of the AI startups, which have taken a lot of investor money, a big focus on building something that then gets taken out by Microsoft or OpenAI or Anthropic or someone the following month. And in amongst a very busy enterprise software landscape, Alteryx is thriving. So I'm just curious. So what are your learnings or perhaps top tips for those who are out there working in the data platforms and software, enterprise software space at the moment? What have you learned on the way up and with the focus that's driving the success that Alteryx is seeing?
I'd love to have a really sophisticated answer. I think the simple one is, I think we solve an important customer problem really well. And
Yeah.
our customers really like the product. Our core product has a net promoter score over 60, which is extremely high for enterprise software. And so, the hype side of the curve that you mentioned is definitely there. There are a lot of small startups. When you're a small startup, you're sort of trading on potential. When you're at
Yeah.
$1 billion in revenue, you're trading on demonstrable problem solving. And I think that's quite sticky and has some scale to it. And I think for us, the thing driving success right now is, again, it's a simple answer. We're really listening to our customers. And what our customers told us was, you know what, all the stuff you built for the cloud data platforms, we want in the product we're using today. So that's our Alteryx One strategy. Our customers are telling us, hey, we want you to partner more closely with those cloud data platforms. So we have a whole strategy around partnering with them. And our customers are telling us we need a way to bring predictability into AI. And we think Alteryx can help us do that. And so, we're not out just launching random new products. What we're doing is rolling up our sleeves, going in and talking to customers about their real problems, solving those problems, and then helping other customers use those best practices. And folks like yourselves, we have an amazing partner ecosystem that bring that pragmatism as well, that are, showing up and walking the walk and helping people solve real problems. And I think that's a great place to be when you're at the size and scale that we're at.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's such a simple, powerful answer, solving real problems and really listen to your customers. That's a recurring theme. So I was talking to Andrew MacMillan, who's CIO, international CIO for Bank of America on this show a couple of months back. And I was asking him about their focus. And he said, he used more reallys. He said, really, really, really listen to your customer. And
Yeah.
and that was his ethos. And that was very much. So it's very consistent. Talking to folks who are in big institutions and progressive tech firms at the right at the top of the tree. It's about connect with the customer and focus on the customer.
Yeah, listen to your customers, listen to your employees, listen to your partners, roll up your sleeves, know what your product does, and then go do the things people are asking you to do. You get rewarded for that over time. And I think we have a pretty good track record of doing that. And, that's the plan. Keep doing that.
Keep doing it and watch the NPS score. I mean, that's a tough metric, that one, but it reveals a lot. So can I ask you, we've been talking about Alteryx a lot, unsurprisingly, given this conversation. But are there other fintechs out there? Any other fintechs out there that you really admire?
I think the whole space is fascinating. I think the feeling I had was 5 or 6 years ago, the kind of consumer focus of fintechs was amazing, like just completely changing the experience around banking. It just felt so much easier to operate in the realm of a fintech than in the traditional banks. And what I would say has been, I think the story of the last couple of years is I think a lot of the really big banks have made incredible strides, sometimes through acquisition, sometimes through their own development, to change the way that they interact with customers. And so I think right now, I would say that some of the big banks are the ones really surprising me when I show up and talk to them about some of the work they're doing, the way they're listening to their customers, the way they're breaking down silos internally, the way they're being ambitious about AI. I just didn't have that feeling at a lot of the big banks again half a decade ago, but I definitely think that's the case. So I would say a couple of the really big banks are the ones that in the last few, I'd say 2 quarters, have really surprised me in what they're building, how they're building it, and how customer centric it is.
Yeah, I think they are catching up. There's a lot more innovation at scale, visible innovation at scale. So just as a takeaway, anything interesting you're reading or listening to currently? You're allowed to say the London Fintech Podcast, of course, but anything on your reading list, Andy?
I actually spent a lot of time in the podcast universe on AI, but I've been focused on, again, AI implementation stories have been really interesting. So that's been an area of focus for me for sure. And then on the reading side, I read a book. Gosh, I got to think of the name of it in a minute. I'll have to send it to you for the notes. But
Okay.
my wife recommended a book to me and it was fantastic, but it was really bizarre. It was a book about someone trapped in the same day every day. And I just thought it was an interesting reflective book on, if you take a step back, like how much of your life is repetitive and your relationships with people.
Yeah.
And it just made me think. And I love books that make me think. And I thought it was wonderful. And it kind of wasn't about data and AI and everything else. It was just sort of like, how do you make the most of every day? And I thought it was fantastic. So maybe apparently not good enough for me to remember the title, but I'm terrible with titles. But it was,
For those
but
who've got this far in the conversation, we will find out what that book is. Maybe it's the written version of Groundhog Day, and we'll put it in the notes.
in the show notes. Yeah, for sure. But I think, look, to me, busy with work, but you got to find time for some of those other things. And so,
Yeah.
I would definitely tell people to, don't get so caught up in the AI that you don't take time to pick something up and read or do something with your kids or whatever.
Yeah, super. And where to find out more? If anyone wants to find out more, and I hope they do, about Alteryx, or get in touch with you.
Yeah, our website's the main landing place where you can do trials and see what the product does. We've got some great case studies. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, on Twitter, so you can find me in those places. Always happy to engage with folks. It is part of what I think is so amazing about those platforms. So if there's anything you want to chat about, you can definitely find me online. I'm happy to engage.
Yeah, and if you ask nicely, Andy might show up and build some data workflows for you.
That's right. Absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Look, I love the conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights, Andy. All the best for Alteryx's continued trajectory.
All right. Thanks, Tony. It was really fun to see you and enjoyed the conversation.